We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which each of us meet today and pay our respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. We extend that respect to Indigenous peoples here with us today. Welcome to today's webinar, Attracting High-End Clients as a Small to Medium Enterprise. We're introducing ConceptV, who currently offer a solution for architects to establish themselves in the luxury market. Today's webinar will be hosted by Tim Geldard, who's the CEO of ConceptV. Tim is the founder of a PropTech company, ConceptV, and has a background in property economics, residential construction, and property valuation. Tim studied data science, cognitive psychology, and spent the last 5 years working alongside architects, designers, developers, and everyday people to create accessible technology that improves communication in the industry. So I'll hand you over to Tim.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Tamaris. Nice to see you again. My background is in property economics. I started ConceptV in 2018 with the goal to connect people during the design and build process. The whole goal here was to help remote connection, to help people really emotionally connect with the design and understand quite fluidly throughout the process. I'm really looking forward to sharing everything that we've been doing with you, so I'll just jump straight into that. Let's jump in. Historically, digital maturity has been correlated with firm size. That means that while aware of the available technologies, smaller companies have had a harder time implementing them. I'm sure it's not a surprise, but those that are able to implement them have greater efficiency, less delays, and less need to reinvent the wheel at every project. Now, if we have a look at the architecture market in Australia, 98% of all firms have less than 28 employees. And half of the people that are in this practice are working on their own. Now, over the last few years since COVID, there's been quite a lot of change, a lot of extra pressure that I don't think anyone was really expecting. There's been a lot more movement to online activities. There's been a lot more reliance on remote connection, and that heavy reliance on relationships and referrals and word of mouth to generate new business has made it difficult to move into new markets. Now, interestingly enough, less than a third of architecture firms actually explored new services since COVID in order to take advantage of emerging markets. Now, that 3% spent on marketing and business development, that means that the image of a company, the brand of a company as it appears online and outside of the networks that people are currently used to dealing with, it's less than large companies. Now, the good thing here, and this is why it's great for small to medium enterprises, is the luxury market has really started booming. There's high net worth individuals. These are people worth at least 1.5 million, and ultra high net worths, which are worth at least 45 million. Now, these are booming. These are people that are moving across to Australia, and this does represent a really great opportunity for small to medium enterprises to really show their personalization, show their worth, show their value. In this space, there's already been huge growth from demand in that space. Now, there was a point about a little over a year ago where almost 20% of all development applications in Australia were for medium to high density luxury stock. Now, they didn't all go through, but even in the last 2 years in the real estate space, luxury purchases have doubled. Now, a lot of this comes from a variety of factors. There's new wealth creation, there's greater travel volumes, there's new migration coming to Australia, and a lot of expats returning from UK and overseas to avoid the Ukraine war. This is where the opportunity is. Despite the amount of development going in to service these people, there is still a critically low amount of stock. Now, in the development space, while that has still been booming and moving forward, there is still demand for more. And in the private space, well, this hasn't really seen much attention at all. So that means that there are a lot of these luxury people looking for new places to build and looking to engage an architect to do it. And I guess the question is, how do we actually do that? I think it's probably why so many of you signed up for this webinar. Well, firstly, let's have a look at who these people actually are. These are people that have maybe sold a business, that have maybe invented something or have a large portfolio, Well, these are people that work in very high stress, high paid jobs like surgeons or financial bankers. These are people that are constantly moving between different residences. On average, these ultra high net people, they have 2.9 homes, and they're constantly moving between them. Whether it's leisure, whether it's business, that travel and that movement is a really key identifier of the market. Now, because of this push to remote connections and this movement from overseas and interstate, a lot of these people may or may not speak English as their first language, and they may or may not be around the local area. So that means that there is a very high need for effective communication in this space. Now that we've identified who these people are, let's have a look at what they value. And we've been able to find a lot of studies on different industries and the way that luxury is both perceived and presented by different brands. Now we can break down value association into three key areas. Functional value comes into what are the physical attributes of the process? What are the elements that are just an expectation? Does this place provide me shelter and safety? Are there enough bedrooms? Is there enough space in the garage for all of my fancy cars? Can my neighbors see me showering? From an experiential perspective, this is subjective. This is, how does the space make me feel? How do I engage with the place? And how does living in this space speak to who I am? From a symbolic perspective, this is a lot more social oriented. This is the social perception. This is, how does this thing, or how does this house, or how does this product represent who I am? What is the social perception of me having this thing and having other people engage in this space with me? We look at consumer behavior in different markets. There's a lot that we can learn about what luxury really is. Now, luxury is something special. It's something that is associated with a particular brand or experience. This is the kind of thing that might have a glass of champagne waiting for you when you first walk into a store. It is about knowing your name, knowing what your preferences are, knowing who you are, and just having everything about the experience tailored to you. And this is all about personality of the brand. If you go to a Rolex store, even if you've never been in there before, you go in there with an expectation of a higher caliber of service, something that you can connect with emotionally, something that caters to what you need and who you are. This is an intangible and symbolic value associated with the brand. Now, from a personal level, about what goes into a particular decision of purchase or service, emotions are at the core of every experience in this particular realm. People are looking for differentiation, something that is unique, something that is specific to them, something that expresses their individuality. And from a brand level, they're looking for, well, exactly that. Something that is personal, something that isn't standard, something that's unique, and something that is connected with that brand in particular. It's the personality of the brand. Now, if we look at the experience, luxury is much more a state of mind than anything tangible. From the highly individualized perspective, fortunately for architects, this is what you guys do better than anyone else. This is your bread and butter. It's building something for the individual that speaks to the individual. From a sensory experience, this is about what connects the person to the design. Think about how important visuals are. Anytime you've dealt with a client and you've shown them an image or a render or something about what their future design is, you can see it on their face and the way that they engage. They are experiencing a lot of emotions because of that sensory experience. Now, think about what else can you give them? What other tangible things can you provide these customers that enable that sensory experience when they want to? From comfort, this is psychological comfort for the most part. This is trust. This is certainty. This is security. This is about Does this person trust that their needs are going to be met, that whoever is taking care of them knows what they're doing, knows who they are, and will provide them with what they want without needing to necessarily ask for it? Standardization is not what we're after. We're looking for something that is exclusive. This particular market, they're wanting access to new things, something that is different to what everyone else can get. Now, they'll take risks and they're willing to pay for it, but they do that from an education perspective. They're looking into everything about the brand and that personality in order to identify, is this going to be exclusive? Is this going to meet my needs? Can I trust this entire experience or service? And am I happy to go forward and pay for it? Now, if we loop these all together, there's a lot of different ways it's been shown in the industries. Think about airline travel, for instance. Economy class, first class, two different people. Both of them are going to get on the plane at about the same time. They're both going to get on the plane at about the same place. They're both going to get off the plane in the same place at around the same time. But the value perception is entirely different. In the first class, it's about experience. It's about differentiation. It's about getting something that no one else has access to. It's that added comfort. It's that added attention to them. It's about personalizing the entire duration of that flight to the needs and desires of that individual. It comes with a sense of prestige, it has that association. From an expectations perspective, this is directly from AIA's study into architecture specifically, and customers are looking for evidence. They're looking for certainty that the architect can deliver their vision. They're looking for assurance that they're going to get what they need. And in this particular market, this is looking at how convenient is the service? What kind of engagement am I going to get throughout the process? What research are they going to go through to determine that? So some great ways to show this is portfolios, this is testimonials, and a lot of this is word of mouth. But having something that is available online that they can spend time doing their research ahead of time, this is a really great way to start attracting clients that aren't in your network. Now, from that convenience perspective, this is about time for the most part, time and energy. Luxury customers, whether this is individuals or whether this is developers catering to luxury people, time is by far and large the most important element to them. Time is money, effectively. Think about an end client wanting to engage with their design or engage in conversation about their design when they're at the back of a cab, or whether they're lying next to a pool in some luxury resort. Time and access on their terms is a very critical part to that value perception and that convenience. Now, by far, the most important element in any of these cases is effective communication. Studies done by the AIA showed that the vast majority of people, and this isn't just end customers, by the way, this is everyone that's involved in the project, they value a high level of engagement to show that effective communication. This is collaborators like interior designers or engineers or site surveyors. This is end customers who may be designing a home for themselves. This is developers who are trying to sell particular stock to meet the demands of luxury customers. That effective communication is a crucial and critical part to the value association of an architect. Now, that same study identified that digital technologies is critical to achieving effective communication. And in the luxury industry, digitalization of service has been one of the biggest changes. This is something to interact with before they buy. Now, this comes back to the education that a lot of these end customers will go through before they make a choice. It's having something online, perhaps, that they can interact with to get that evidence and assuredness of the luxury experience they're expecting. So a few automobile companies that have online tools to help choose what leather you want, or what steering wheel you want, or what different elements of the car you can play with. Well, hopefully, the key takeaways that have come from this part is that end customers are looking for something unique, something that is not standard, something that they have access to that no one else really does. And this goes into that brand perception, that personality of the brand. Now, the emotional connection, this is not just the end result, but this is throughout the entire process. And that ties in perfectly with the convenience. They're wanting that emotional connection, they're wanting that uniqueness, and they're wanting that symbolic value throughout the entire process, from initial design and initial concepts right through final delivery of the final product. Now, the complication to add into this is that with these people being remote and overseas and expecting something that fits in the way that they operate to build that convenience, you really need to be looking at ways that you can engage with people remotely. Now, architecture on the whole has become a pretty product-oriented practice. Award ceremonies that I've been to, it's been about the final outcome of the process. The service side of the architecture experience hasn't been celebrated. And this is a really key area to pay attention to when looking to bring on new clients in the luxury space. Now let's have a look at the differences between small to medium enterprises and large companies. Now, I'm sure that a lot of you agree with me on this one, but time is one of the most scarce resources in any architecture practice. You guys are the architects, you're the receptionist, you're the project management, you're the chief financial officer, you're the billing team, you're everything. And as a result of that, it can get a little bit challenging to implement new technologies. A lot of these technologies, they afford the ability to have analytic insights into what's working, what's not working, where efficiencies can be gained, and where sunk costs are really taking up your business. At the same time, your partner networks. Having a lot of your business coming through referrals and word of mouth can run the risk of pigeonholing. If you're getting the same kinds of projects from the same kinds of customers, how do you venture out into new spaces? Especially if these new spaces are somewhere else in the country or somewhere else in the world, and your networks don't expand into that space, you can make it very challenging to branch out. Now, large companies, they don't have these problems. Large companies, they have the benefit of a greater division of labor. They might have a specialist and project manager, they might have a specialist to help collaborate with the architect and the other designers. A lot of the time, they're able to put a lot of services under the one roof. So by aggregating services, it's a greater level of convenience. And there's been studies released by IBISWorld that show that a lot of customers are choosing large companies because of that convenience factor. Now, additionally, with greater level of resources and greater freedom to implement new technologies, larger companies have it a bit easier to customize solutions, whether that's altering existing technology, creating their own technology, or personalizing a specific process for an individual client. Larger companies aren't quite as locked into how they've been operating before. As a result, economies of scale, they're able to operate with a much larger level of profitability. Now, another thing to keep in mind in this particular space is the image curation that large companies can afford makes it easier for them to show a greater level of perceived value. Now, this might be the convenience and the one-stop shop element, but additionally, it's beautiful renders up on their website. It is showing the virtual reality and the unique experiences that their own customers are getting. Okay, now let's start talking about some technologies. Now, first off, it's important to recognize that digital transformation doesn't necessarily mean just having the shiniest new tools or the shiniest new technology and showing everyone that you have it. There's a lot of trends in the architecture community around new technologies and how they're being implemented. But today I'm going to be focusing mostly on how it relates to the end customer's experience. Now, to start off with, the visual element is such a critical element to properly understanding and emotionally communicating the design and its intent. Now, I'm going to be focusing on the design, presentation, and revision stages, because there's a lot of opportunity here to show your value to the end customer. During the design stage, it's important to recognize that there doesn't need to be a radical change to practice in order to implement digital transformation or effective communication with the end customer or meet new expectations that have been emerging. There are a lot of technologies that you can adopt without changing your existing process, and it's important to look at new technologies in how it can fit the way that you currently work. Now, live rendering tools, this is things like Enscape, Lumion, Twinmotion. These have been a fantastic addition to the architect's toolset for early concepts, for design validation, for implementing quick updates and changes to test the overall design. Really fantastic for this process. Artificial intelligence, this is obviously an area that's catching a lot of interest from a lot of places. And in the architecture space, it's not something to necessarily be afraid of. It's not going to replace architects, but what it can do is help you gain time. It can help you test concepts early on. It can help save a lot of time during that documentation process and allow you to focus a lot more on what the end customer is looking for. The most interesting one during the early design stages is drone captures. Now, this has gained a lot of popularity in the off-plan sales space, and customers are expecting to see, what can I see from my apartment? And there are a lot of ways that you can incorporate this in your current practice. Now, drone captures, especially in the luxury space, can provide enormous amounts of value right from the early design stages that carry throughout the process. Drone captures or other site scanning technologies can help your end customer identify, well, can my neighbors see me shower? And most likely, in the luxury space, the site that you're working with is going to have a lot of fantastic views that you're trying to integrate into that overall design. Now, there's complications with drone technology and incorporating those captures into your space. There's difficulties with legals, getting the right permissions to be able to fly in particular spaces. There's particular equipment that's necessary, and there is a bit of knowledge that you need to be able to do it properly. But this is one of those areas that's a really great candidate for outsourcing. Now, if you're not familiar yet, there's a lot of capability to incorporate these types of things in existing live rendering tools. Again, if you're not familiar with it, I'd encourage you to look out whatever your live rendering software is and how you can incorporate 360 drone photography. There's also a few other tools that you can utilize to edit some of these images, because there are considerations that relate to the site in particular. For example, if there's a lot of trees on the site that are later going to be removed, this can create complications. Or if the site is proximate to a lot of large buildings or close elements, that can also create some complications. And during the presentation stage, there's a few factors to take into account here, and they all come back down to that overall user experience, that overall convenience and accessibility. Now, I'm sure most of you bring customers into the office to go through your Revit model or go through your Enscape model, and there's a lot of value in that. There's a lot of ways that you can show people and help them experience the design and emotionally connect to it. Now, live rendering tools in this particular space do create a lot of value. However, the difficulties that can come with it is the extra time and attention it takes to get those models up to a polished point that are ready for client presentation. Additionally, it doesn't provide the end customer with that level of ownership. See, once they leave the office, they don't have anything to take home with them. And on top of that, it means they need to organize their time to fit the way that the architect is needing to present, which in most cases, this is fine. But in the luxury market, especially these people that are overseas and traveling around a lot, the added inconvenience of going through that process can make it additionally challenging. Visualization has been around for a very long time, and getting rendered images done or getting rendered fly-throughs done, these are great ways to utilize the sensory experience of visuals to enable your end customer to connect with that design. Now here, some of the challenges can be the overall cost of high quality renders, because especially in the luxury space, quality really needs to be high. But additionally, the time it takes, the process and the logistical implementations of delivering renders at multiple different stages. Virtual reality and augmented reality. So there's been a lot of buzz that's going on in virtual reality, and there's a lot of value that you can get by being in the space and exploring it. It definitely comes into that sensory experience. So there's a big tick there. However, virtual reality can come with a couple of downsides. I go so far as to say that a lot of you probably have virtual reality headsets sitting in a drawer somewhere because either your customers didn't really like it or not enough of them liked it so much that you wanted to bring it in for every practice. Now, some of the other challenges here is the cyber sickness that a lot of people experience. There's been a few studies that have shown that about 80% of people will experience some form of cyber sickness. This is things like vertigo, this is headaches, this can be dizziness, it can be a general discomfort with having a headset on your face. And some of the other difficulties that come with this is the restrictions. When you come out of virtual reality, you can't go back in unless you're back in with the architect. Leaving the office, you're relying on memory again. So the residual value of virtual reality just isn't there. Now, on top of that, there's a degree of isolation that comes with virtual reality. Even if you're with your partner or your business partner or whoever else you're going through the design process with, in virtual reality, it can create a bit of a barrier to connecting and sharing the experience with the people that you care about. Projections is another area that's aiming to solve the same problem that virtual reality does. It's the ability to be in the space, to understand the scope, the feeling, the overall user experience of what that end design actually is. Now, some great benefits here because it does give you that overall scale and the ability to walk around. However, some of the limitations come into not having any walls or any furniture or anything like that can make it a bit challenging to properly understand what that design is. Now, additionally, it does have the same limitations of residual value. After you've left that space, you're relying on memory again. And when it comes into convenience and the huge value that luxury clients place on that convenience, projections, just like virtual reality, have a limited amount of value that can be gained. BIMx has been gaining quite a lot of popularity. This is a native export from ArchiCAD. And here we run into some compatibility issues. For example, if you don't use ArchiCAD, then BIMx is a bit harder to properly implement. However, BIMx definitely ticks that accessibility box. You can get to it on your computer, you can get to it on your mobile. Shareability, being able to have that wherever you are and share it with your friends, your family, or your business partners, big tick there. From the convenience factor, not needing to make time with the architect and go into the office to experience it, another big tick there. However, the downsides of BIMx comes in ease of use and navigation. We've chatted to a lot of architects over the last 12 months, and a lot of architects, they themselves struggle with using it. From a navigation perspective, if you're very familiar with games or similar types of technology, it's intuitive. But if you're not, then it can be quite frustrating and difficult. When we were first looking into how BIMx gets utilized, I was pretty fine with it because I used to play a lot of games, but my business partner got stuck multiple times underneath hedges or beneath subfloors, and that difficulty with navigation can create a lot of frustration and struggle with the experience. Now, in the luxury space, having frustration or something that isn't intuitive or something that you need help with, it really limits the experience. It takes away from that overall trust in the end output and makes it difficult to properly emotionally connect. Now, additionally, BIMx is designed for mass and bulk and volume. It's not designed for realism. It's not designed for lighting the space realistically, and it doesn't allow for proper emotional connection to the overall design. Render tours, these are a new and emerging technology. Render tours gain that residual value because after you've gone through it with your customer, after they've left, they have that access to it. They can get back to it when they want. It can work on their computers, on their existing devices. They can be intuitive and they can very easily be shared with everyone else. Render tours, these have popped up a fair bit since COVID. Now, when COVID hit the world and the real estate boom happened, a lot of sales and a lot of real estate interaction moved online. And having remote tours to be able to go around a space and interact with really helped with engaging people across the nation and across the world. Now, I'm sure that a lot of you have used a lot of 360 tours in the real estate space, and some of them are really great. Some of them are really easy and you can find your way around and all of that's fine and happy. But a lot of other times, they're not very well put together. They can be disjointed, they can be confusing, they can introduce a lot of frustration. Well, the same thing happens with rendered tours, and this is something to be very aware of. This largely comes down to the use of the same technology. Rendered tours, for the most part, are made by rendering companies that are using the same technology that the real estate industry is using to create those online tours. So it comes down to skill, it comes down to professionalism, it comes down to experience, just in the same way that an architect can have a variety of different skills and specialities, so too does the rendered tour industry. The revision stage is probably where it differs the most depending on the architect. Some architects will want to get their clients in during early concept. Others will want to wait until the design's a bit more finalized before they bring in the client. Either way, clear and effective communication is really critical during this process. There's a study published by NVIDIA showing that 85% of the AEC industry find the design review process to be overly time-consuming. Now, this isn't overly surprising, given that the technologies available for this stage are pretty standard and unilateral. Typically, a lot of these design revisions will occur in person, going through the Revit model and making changes on the fly. Alternatively, it's through phone calls or video calls or just general person-to-person communication. Now, there are technologies to help with this process. I'm sure a lot of you already use 2D annotations, whether that is printed plans with annotations, then scanned and sent by email, or done on PDF viewers to, again, make those annotations and send them on. Some of you may be using more sophisticated revision tools like Review or the collaboration portal in Enscape or Revit. And for those of you not familiar with that capacity, this can be a really effective way to increase efficiency when collaborating with other customers, with other companies, I should say. Additionally, chat platforms. again, this is very good with collaborating with other companies and other firms, but in both cases, it excludes the end customer. So the end customer is still relying on emails, 2D annotations to be part of that process. Now, each of these three different elements, the design stage, the presentation, and the revision stage, each of them are disconnected. Now, the technologies aimed at addressing these, they're isolated. They're looking at fixing a particular problem in a particular one of these stages. And for the end customers in the luxury space, that level of convenience, that level of ease, and that level of consistency are really, really important. And having separate and disparate processes to handle each of these can make it challenging to make it smoother and easier and gain that level of trust that these end customers are looking for. ConceptV, we've spent the last 5 years connecting people. So what we've done is to take all of these different processes and build them into the one platform. We wanted to make something that could help with internal collaboration, could be accessed from anywhere. So if your employees or your staff or your collaborators aren't in the same space, you can still have that communication. We wanted to make something that was easy to use by everyone and didn't have any difficulties with compatibility with different software. And we've built in that revision process so that the clear and effective communication can be exercised throughout the design, presentation, and revision stages throughout the entirety of the design process. I'm going to go in and I'm going to show you an example. But one of the key things to take away from all of this is the variation management is one of the greatest risks for late stage changes and late stage variation. Trying to identify what was said and when, and who said what and why can be quite challenging if it's mostly through emails and phone calls and other methods of traditional revision process. We wanted to make something that was easy and accessible. For the end customer, this is getting to it from their phone, from their laptop, from their tablet, without needing to download anything, without needing to set anything up, and without needing to actually learn how to use it. At the same time, we wanted to make it easy for architects or for designers. So we built it in such a way that means that you can just upload your ArchiCAD or your Revit or your Vectorworks file in conjunction with your finish schedules and any other documentation straight up to our servers, and that's about it, really. Okay, I'm going to show you through a project that we delivered quite recently. Now, this was a collaboration between the architect and an interior designer. This one was used during design stage as well as for currently off the plan sale. Now, we can see here that there's a high level of detail that comes down to textures. If you're wanting to see something very detailed, that can be built in. And being able to move around the space is made to be quite easy and intuitive. And the context, building in that drone surrounding area that I mentioned earlier on, we've been able to coordinate that so the views of the area, the really special element to this particular site gets built into the design. Now, there's a few elements to point out in the menu. So from the information here, we can build in whatever information that is, whatever you want your client to know, whatever you want your client to see. And if there's any particular documents that need to go in there, those can be built straight in. Additionally, if there's other collateral that you want to show, we can build those into the menu too. So different renders, and again, this might be images, might be videos, this might be websites, anything. It doesn't really matter. So that can be built right into the menu there. Now, the floor plan here, there's a lot to explore in this place. It's a gorgeous design. There's a lot of detail and a lot of things to explore. Towards the end of this video, you'll be able to see the QR code that can take you in, and I encourage you to go through and check it all out. It is a stunning design, and there'll be a lot for you to engage and interact with. I want to show how this can be shared. So in the share panel, here we can see the QR code, and this is what you'll be able to scan, but we can share it straight to social media, copy a link and send it via text or email or anything really, because it is designed to be built online, something that you can find on your mobile, something on your laptop, on anything that you need to go to. Now, talking about level of detail, This particular project, again, we came on relatively early on, and I'm just going to switch over to an earlier design stage. And depending on the architect, you may or may not want a particular level of detail at any stage. So if you're wanting to save a bit of time on building that detail into your model, then you can just build in an information hotspot to show, hey, this is what the concept is, this is what I'm thinking, and get your client's thoughts on it. Now, to make the revision process easy, we've built in a tool just to allow simple annotations. I'll click this up in the corner, and there's an annotation that I want to make. Then either me as the end customer, or you as the architect or interior designer, whoever else is involved in this project, we can do an annotation, just like we normally would, probably with a bit more detail than a circle. But following that, I can now type a comment. I can tag a user, or I can tag the architect or whoever else is involved and ask a question. Can we move this? Just use that. And from here, all of these annotations get built into the core dashboard. And this is a great way to keep track of all the different comments that get made, all the different requests and commentary, and find that all in a single space. Now, at the end of this video, you'll find a link to some offers that we've got specifically for the AIA webinar. So I encourage you to check those out and come back to this project and explore it in all its glory. Now, if we look at what drives technological adoption, what drives digitalization, I'm sure it's not a surprise that for the most part, it's for aiming for better accuracy and efficiency, greater quality standards, and overall more effective communication. Now, this part I'm sure isn't a surprise, but ultimately the difficulty adopting these come down to transition cost. Now, that might be the cost of new software or hardware, the amount of time that it takes to upskill and implement that into your practice. But interestingly enough, a lot of it comes from a lack of collaboration. Now, there's a lot more of this coming into play with technologies like Revit and Enscape, where it can connect with the same product used by someone else. But that overall collaboration element is still quite restricted to specific stakeholders. Now, why the technology winds up failing or gets abandoned after it's been implemented is the diversification in the industry. There's a lot of different ways to perform the architecture practice, and there's a lot of different elements to what needs to be done, let alone the different types of projects. And what we found is that there's a lot of discrepancy between bringing in these different practices and technologies into a business, because for the most part, they're standard. And you can't bring in a standard technology into a diverse set of use cases. Now, that difficult to use part, this does come back to the upskilling and the training that's required. And overall, just sometimes it can be quite clunky, which can throw some people off. Now, if we look at what we can do in order to expand these services without the resources or the capital that large companies have, we can look at partnerships. We can look at outsourcing. I'm sure it's not a surprise that almost 100% of architects experience burnout in 2021. I've said it before, I'll say it again, you guys work harder than I have ever seen before. Now, doing things in-house is fantastic in that you can adapt it to fit your specific needs. It gives you more control over your design, your image, your vision. It lets you learn a lot more, and it means that you can be interacting directly with everyone involved in the project. However, the time restrictions can prevent a lot of new and broad technological adoption. But partnerships and outsourcing represent a relatively easy way to expand that serviceability, to expand your networks, and to expand your overall perceived value and capacity. Now, working with interior designers or landscape architects or even sales agency, if you're targeting developers, these are all great ways to get your name associated with a wider variety of service. Now, in the same way that bringing in specialized skills that are adjacent and synergetic to the architecture practice, you can do the same in other areas of speciality. If technology, or if visualization, or if some other client-oriented practice or service is available, then it's worth exploring. You can find companies that are specialists in different fields that can work for you. Now, it's important when you're going through this process to look for partnerships that are local or that are close to how you operate, that have the same ethos. It can be tempting to look at outsourcing overseas for cheap alternatives, but you don't need to look at it in the long term. You need to be looking at it, what kind of continued value, what residual value can this bring me and my customers? At the end of the day, it's your image that's on the line. So naturally, you have to be quite careful about who you allow to be a part of it. Now, these partnerships can be a very effective means of elevating your overall business, whether that is your social image, whether that's your overall perceived value and convenience, whether that is bringing a level of uniqueness to your end customers that others can't. Going with this approach can come with less risk when it comes to reversibility. I mentioned earlier that transition cost. One of the hardest things about adopting new technology is the transition cost. Because after you've spent the money to buy the hardware, or you've spent the time learning a new skill and bring it into your practice, what happens if it doesn't do what you needed? And we went through some data just earlier about all of the reasons why the technology fails or is abandoned after it's been adopted. Now, that's a big risk, especially because it is, it's the cost of not doing something else that you could have done. And it's hard to predict ahead of time just what the consequences may be. This is a lot less of a risk when it comes to partnerships and outsourcing. Using it once or twice to test how it can be beneficial and valuable. If it doesn't work out, then you can just not do it again. You don't have to repeat it on the next project, and you haven't really wasted anything except for whatever was involved in that one project. Additionally, when you're looking at how to attract new clients, especially luxury clients, look at what your acquisition cost is. What can you afford to build into a budget so that you can hook the end client? What budget can you allocate in order to do that? What's that customer's worth? Use the unique benefits that a small to medium enterprise has. As a smaller company, relationship forming can be a lot stronger. Connecting with the end customer on a personal level is something that you guys are absolutely great at. Looking at partnerships and outsourcing, you're able to pivot and adapt to market movements and changes, as well as the individual client needs, relatively easily. There isn't someone above you that you need to get permission from. There isn't red tape that you need to overcome. There isn't memos that you need to send out to a large amount of employees. You're a small, tight unit of people that you can move and respond when you need to. These are all things that larger companies typically find more challenging. Yes, they have more resources and diversified skills, but their capacity to pivot and to move quickly just isn't there as much. All right, now let's go into the impact of all of this. Technology and digitalization of the architecture practice is heavily correlated with increased profit margins. And this is in the face of very significant competitive pressure in the overall space. And this is especially true for the luxury demographic, as there's already targets going in there from the development space. Over the last couple of years, with that growing demand for luxury stock, developers naturally have flocked to it. Now, if this is a market that you're just now moving into, there is a bit of a head start for people that have already captured these types of developers. But moving doesn't need to be slow, doesn't necessarily need to be hard. It doesn't even need to be expensive, really. If you find the right people or you find the right products and you can work out how they can be built into what you already do, then you can capture a lot of these clients quite easily, really. Now, if we look at technology adoption, again, there is no one size fits all. And there's no one size fits all for the end customer either. And there shouldn't really be. I mean, everything about architecture is individualized, it's personalized, and that standardization element is something that no one really likes, and especially the luxury client. That transition cost I mentioned earlier, this is something to pay a lot of attention to and to spend a lot of time thinking about before departing on a particular activity to incorporate new technology. It's hard to know specifically what the potential outcomes may be, but that transition cost, how long is it going to take to learn? What is the opportunity cost of doing that? What could that money or time be used for elsewise? Looking at revenue generation, by adopting this technology or this new practice or process, how is that going to get me more money? Is that going to put me on the same level of someone else, or is it going to help me show how distinctive I am? Make the client experience that you have distinctive, something that people can really connect to, something that people can really understand and perceive when they're looking from afar. Definitely consider the identity. Who are you? Just in the same way that the luxury client's looking for self-actualization, they're looking for personality. So understanding your identity and working out how to choreograph that image in such a way that it's visible and obvious to everyone who looks at you, that's something to pay a lot of attention to when you're looking at what to adopt. That reversibility and scalability, I mentioned the transition cost earlier. By adopting something that does take a lot of work or capital or energy, how easy is it to go back? What are the costs of abandoning it after you've used it for a little while? Now, that ubiquitous computing element, this is taking advantage of what there already is. You don't necessarily need to buy new expensive hardware, and in a lot of instances, there's a lot of downsides to doing so. Looking at ways where you can elevate your practice in such a way that no one, including you, has to buy new hardware. This is a great way to create something that is a lot more accessible. People have devices, people have powerful devices, whether it's phones, tablets, laptops, everyone's got one. And they have all of these sensors, they have all of these amazing parts to them. So look at ways that you can utilize them to enable a greater serviceability. Now, that sandbox culture, this goes back to how can you take bits and bobs from here and there and bring it specifically into your practice to elevate the overall outcome. Looking at value perception, it's no surprise that most architects agree that relationships matter more than marketing. And it's also no surprise that digital marketing and digital presence is one of the biggest areas for improvement in the architecture industry. Now, digital marketing doesn't need to just be Facebook ads or Instagram posts or something else that you get bombarded with all the time. Digital marketing can be an augmentation of relationships. It can be a digital medium through which those relationships and your story is told. Effectively, this is what relationships do already. Getting referrals, word of mouth, this is sharing the experience that someone has had with you in your practice and giving people a relationship with you before they meet you. So when you're looking at digital marketing or looking at what you can do to grab the attention of people that are outside of your network, think about what you can do to let people have a relationship with you before they meet you. Think about what your personality is. Think about what your identity is, and then incorporate these different technologies to tell the story of your personality. Highlight the experience and the journey, not just the end result. Now, when you're approaching this, try to avoid sameness. Now, it might be tempting to try and compete with larger companies by doing what they're doing, to try and match their visualization, their technologies, their image, but that's a zero-sum game. Even if you do get to the same level, it's sameness. It's not unique, it's not personal. Think about your identity and how you can tell your story. If people are going through websites or social media and they're finding more and more of the same rendered images or the same things, it doesn't grab attention. But if you're showing something unique about yourself, if you're showing your personality that is distinctive, it catches people's attention. Now, that's the great thing about some of these digital technologies. And this is just generally a good way of looking at any investment, but try and use one project or one particular investment for multiple points of value. How can you have work done or an investment done for an individual client and repurpose it for other points of value? Try to give your client something that improves their experience, that also generates more referrals and tells your story online. Think about how you can use it to improve the value perception across the board. Now, I mentioned earlier how large companies are often using data analytics to be able to increase their efficiency, to drive new decisions, and to improve their overall value perception. And that's one of the great things about these digital technologies, is that it can help you understand how your clients, their friends and family, or business partners, are interacting with your work. Now, you can simultaneously use it for your online presence, for your digital portfolio, and you can track how people are engaging with your brand online and how they're forming that relationship with you before they meet you. Now, that's the other thing about digital technologies, is that interactive content, it enables a lot more. You don't need to rely just on that one thing. You can record and narrate videos or images to tell the story of you and your personality. You can showcase elements about the design that are really important to you or were important to the client, and you can post that up to create an engaging narrative for people to connect with. Now, whatever you do, make sure that your brand is on the front, because when people are watching this kind of stuff, when people are engaging with that personality and that narrative, they're forming associations, and it's very important that your brand stays at the front of it. Now, that 3% of marketing expense and business development that I mentioned doesn't necessarily need to be a lot more. It can be used smarter. Look at how you can combine different expense. Look at what is spent on cost of acquisition for any particular customer. Look at what is spent on a particular customer's experience, and look at how you can use that to double as marketing and business development. You can use everything that I just mentioned there, both as cost of acquisition, as well as marketing and business development, and providing additional value to your customers. Hopefully everyone's learned a lot from today. Some of the final things that I really want to go through and just repeat, I suppose, digital transformation can have a very significant impact on the value proposition for all clients, but especially in the luxury space. Now, the luxury space are interested in the experience of getting the design done. It's not just about the outcome, it's about how do they feel during the process. Don't neglect the service side of architecture, because this is an area that is currently underserved. When you're looking at new technology and what you can bring in to capture these clients and promote your image and promote your brand, look at combinations of tools rather than any one thing individually. If you use a combination of tools and a combination of different services that you can bring in, it means that you can adapt and pivot according to market shifts as well as individual customer needs. The symbolic value, creating and communicating that to end customers is incredibly important. And creating and communicating something that they get symbolic value from is just as important. They need to have something that's tangible. If they're in the office or if they're restricted to utilizing something that isn't credible to particular times or particular places or particular devices, then it diminishes the value that they can get from it. And interestingly enough, that symbolic value that they're paying for can generate more business for you. Because at the end of the day, those relationships will always trump whatever expenditure goes onto brand identity online. That relationship and that sharing of joy and value that your end customers can get from you, that drives new business. That's how you break into new markets, and that's how you capture these customers. Whatever solution you bring in, you need to think about the sensory element. These are people that really care about how their senses are engaged, how their senses are utilized to emotionally connect to the design or the service or the experience. They need something that is engaging, something that is immersive, something that really grabs their attention, but most importantly, is convenient, something that is there and easy, something that they don't need to put the effort into because it's being created for them. Partnerships and outsourcing, these are very viable strategies to elevate the business and the service and gain access to skills and technologies and additional offerings that would otherwise be incredibly difficult to do on your own. Digital marketing, this is a really important area, especially when branching into new markets and branching into the luxury space, especially when they're overseas or interstate. Now, that digital marketing, you don't need to just look at it as a standard EDM or as an online ad or something like that. Digital marketing is about spreading the connection that you're already doing using digital channels. Digitalization in this industry, there are so many ways to go about it. There are so many different things that you can think of, and there's so much uniqueness to each practice that approaching it from a one-size-fits-all is just never going to work, really. Look at what is on offer. Don't look at just adopting the one thing and it being the be-all and end-all. Look at multiple things. How can you integrate elements of each of these different things in part or in whole? How can you avoid the risk of transition cost and low reversibility? How can you curate an expanded network by bringing in partnerships and other elements to associate with your business?
Okay, so we have a few questions from some of the webinar attendees. The first one is, how do we get clients on the east side?
Interesting question. It depends on exactly where that east side is. But there's a few ways to go about it. One, there's the networks and connections. If you do have people that are in that space, then providing them something tangible that they're able to share with friends and family or share with people remotely. Alternatively, if you're going down the digital marketing avenue, you can advertise by location. So you can choose specific areas to advertise to. Alternatively, if you're generating more of a direct relationship, then going to those particular areas, meeting people in some of the areas that a lot of these end customers might be hanging out, and again, sharing them something tangible. It's important to give them something engaging that they can continue to engage with after you first met them and throughout the process afterwards.
And can you expand on your pricing structure?
Sure. Pricing is pretty diverse. We work in a number of industries. We work in commercial development, residential development. We've worked in volume homes, kids homes, and architecture. It does depend quite a lot on the scope of the project as well as the stage. There's a few examples, a few offerings that we have specifically for the AIA that has some indicative pricing in there that you'll be able to check out afterwards. but it can range from initial entries of a couple of grand. And in the luxury space, typically it can go up to around about 25 grand.
And does the tour include a working specification list?
It can, yeah. So the way that the tours get formed, it's not really a one size fits all. So the way that we work is initially we'll get to know the architects because it is a partnership after all, really. And we'll build in the user interface. I'll quickly jump over to an example that I was showing earlier. And building in specifications, PDFs, images, websites, whatever that is, there's a few ways we can build it in. So we can build it in with the information hotspots, which this one's a website. Alternatively, we can build it straight into the user panel. So we've got this here. I can click on documents, and then if there is finishes or schedules or anything that's specific to the project, we can build that straight in that way.
And there's been a couple of questions also around whether you're able or not to share with the attendees the data from your research.
Yeah, of course. The whole webinar should be available for everyone after it gets sent out. There's a lot of data, so if you like reading dense stuff, then you're welcome to go through everything.
Excellent. Well, that's all the questions we have today. So thank you very much, Tim, and thank you to everyone that attended today. We'll be sending out an email to you all with more information and the link for today's webinar on our YouTube channel.
I'm also just going to put up some examples here. So you're welcome to scan these with your phones, get in and check out some different projects that we've done. Additionally, there'll be some links in the follow-up material that gets sent out.
Great. And these are QR codes to tours that you can look at on your phone?
Yeah, they are. So one of them is an apartment over there on the right. We do a lot of work with developers to help sell off the plan to the luxury market, as well as on the left there, we've got the house that I showed a bit during this presentation. I encourage you to look at the stages to see where we came on boards and how the project evolved over time. And additionally, there's a fair few functions in there, which would be good to give an indication of what can go into the tour.
Great, that's perfect. Well, thank you so much, Tim. And we look forward to having you back for more information in the future.
Thanks very much for having me. It's been a lot of fun, and everyone feel free to reach out. I do love talking about this stuff, so always happy to have a conversation.
Thank you.